Hi, welcome to the Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Reporting Training. This is one of those trainings that I'm sure everybody's dreading, and this is one of those that, because we get to offer services through Medicaid, that we have to follow. So I wanted to start by kind of defining what fraud, waste, and abuse are. Fraud is an act that's knowingly trying to take money from Medicaid and pay providers for some nefarious deed. The primary feature of fraud is that you actually know you're doing it. The difference between that and waste and abuse are that waste and abuse may be unknowingly or knowingly done. Waste is when we use funding from Medicaid for unnecessary services or goods. The difference between that and abuse is any action that misuses the funds of Medicaid. But both of those are very similar in that they are using funds for purposes that are not generally deemed medically necessary. So it's interesting because a lot of people just automatically think, well, I'm not going to do anything that's fraudulent or wasteful. And there's a lot of places that we do this unknowingly. Take these examples. You work in the office and on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Somehow you bill for a service on Friday and it just goes unchecked. And the client was not actually seen, but we have just submitted a claim for a service that wasn't rendered. So that is waste. Another example is, say, clients are asking to have additional services that aren't actually medically necessary. If you're seeing somebody 2 times a week, even after their crisis has ended, just because they're like feeling much more secure with that, we would have to make a strong argument for why that would be medically necessary. Other examples are, say, your supervisor noticed that you use a CPT code that bills really low, and they just tell you, hey, maybe you should bill at this higher level and change those claims. You're going to, again, have to have a really solid justification for doing that. If you do that without any justification, that is either fraud, if you know about it, or it's waste or abuse. Somewhere it gets really sticky is when we're referring clients. So because we take Medicaid, if we have a client in our private practice, and in our private practice we can't take Medicaid, and we refer them to us, just based on us wanting to keep their Medicaid funding, that's getting a little dicey. What is much more appropriate is to refer the client to 3 resources who can take their insurance. You can include yourself on there if you're available, but you can't just refer to yourself because you want to see the client. It has to be in the client's best interest to refer to you at another site. The other way that this can be really relevant at BraveSpace is the kickback kind of fraud, waste, and abuse. So say that I have a private practitioner who's also working for BraveSpace, and I want to lower somebody's rent so that they can refer some of their people to BraveSpace. That's a kickback kind of fraud and is illegal. So we have to be really diligent about equitable kind of service, impartial service, and not favoring the people who are here at BraveSpace. What's important for you to know is that if you notice something that looks like fraud, waste, and abuse, every single one of us is expected to report. The way that we would report is we would call the fraud, waste, and abuse line, which is 1-888-FRAUD-01. There's also a website that's listed in that piece of paper right there. And there are protections for people who report. There's no retaliation against people who report. So, if you see me doing something that's fraudulent, you're supposed to report me. If I see you, I'm supposed to report you. What I can say for our environment is that it's important to also just talk to your supervisors. If these things are happening, the number one thing is that they stop happening. And we will be accountable for whatever kinds of mistakes we've made. If we have made choices willingly and knowingly, that can lead to a work plan. It can also lead to termination. But in the end of all of this, we do want to be accountable, because in the end, us being able to serve clients on Medicaid is the highest value. There are a few laws that govern fraud, waste, and abuse reporting. The first law is the False Claims Act. This law says that the government should never have people overcharge them or sold substandard goods to them. And the way that that one shows up is if somebody submits a claim for a much higher rate than they would bill, say, a client out of pocket. That actually is fraud. So the second law is the Anti-Kickback Statute. That's the law that says we are not allowed to award people who refer to us. So in that example before, that I'm not allowed to give lower rent to renters who then refer their clients to themselves in BraveSpace. The third law is the Physician Self-Referral Law. That law talks more about how we are not allowed to refer clients to ourselves or to any other entities that we have a stakeholding relationship with. So say I had stock in a certain kind of medical wheelchair. I couldn't just send people to get that kind of wheelchair in order to pad my own pockets. The last law is the Criminal Healthcare Fraud Statute. This one talks about how it's unlawful for any group of providers to knowingly and willfully set up a scheme that will defraud the government funds. So say as a group we were thinking about creating false clients and setting up a claim system for people who actually weren't enrolled in BraveSpace, and we did that as an organization. That would be very much unlawful under this statute. The other thing that's important to consider about these laws is that they all have pretty impressive penalties. They can be both a monetary penalty, they can also be imprisonment. So that usually falls upon the employer, which would be BraveSpace, and therefore would pretty much take BraveSpace out of business. So in the long run, the importance of following this kind of expectation is really for our clients, so that we can stay in business, so that we can be practicing within the ethics and confines of our world. So if you have any questions about fraud, waste, and abuse, please talk to your supervisor or to me, and we're really happy to help with any sort of questions or concerns. And thank you so much for watching this video.